I still can't share. Yeah, tonight.
This one there, this one there. A lot of it is just dealing with stakeholders and people who pay their yeah, good process. And there's been a few which is interesting. It's hearing all the mistakes and what they feel that's like there is the now is when tools you do halfway down and these are your brands. So well, they have one of the spirit about yeah. Yeah, it's a little cocktail, so you just pop in we're trying to post
See your back.
yes, I will.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming to our digital design meetup. This is the first one we've managed to do this year, but it's been a bit of a crazy year.
Last one was August last year. That was like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
5 minutes ago. Hi, I'm Dave. This is our place. So, bit of housekeeping for you all. I have to say this. Someone's buzzing my pockets, trying to come in, so I'll go let them know in a second. Fire exits. In the event of fire, do not use lift. Down the stairwell, gather up front. We probably won't have a fire tonight, but just keep that in mind. Bathrooms, male preferred bathrooms are on the even numbered floors, of which this is one. Female preferred bathrooms, up one or down one. Any other housekeeping? We'll have questions at the end of this session.
Yep. So if you have questions for Stacey, just pull them to the end of the session, and we'll run through them then.
Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah, pizza arrives at 7-ish.
Not anymore. We've just changed the camera background. Is that what you want to? Do you want to? Is it better that way? There.
Cool. I have to get out with people.
Yeah, you can go.
Bye.
Cool. Well, this is Stacey. This is Stacey Sorelli. Back in many years ago, we studied what was called human interface design together. They don't really call it that anymore, but we both sort of stayed roughly in the same industry. She leads a design team at IBM in California now. So yeah, I guess I'll hand over. I'll let you, you can say a bit more about what you do if you like, or just crack into your talk, up to you. And we'll push this till the end.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So, hello everybody. I hope you can hear me. Now I'm seeing myself again. Since I'm not positive that you can actually hear me, and I'm about to share my screen, hopefully somebody can do an verbal, yay, we can see you. Yes, we can see your screen. Awesome. Good to know. So, as Leanne mentioned, I am Stacey Saronic, and it is quite late in the evening where I am. I'm in San Diego, San Jose, California. This shows you how late it is for me that I'm telling you I'm in San Diego. But what I'm going to talk about really darn briefly this evening is uncovering, and what that is and why it's so important. And the end of the tape is that it increases psychological safety, not just on design teams, on all teams. But since we are designers, we stick the word design in there. So who am I really fast? That's a picture of me, that's a painting that I finished recently, and that's a picture of the tiny little town outside of Boston, Massachusetts, where I grew up, more or less. I spent most of my career working in design.
We're still looking at you, so we can't see your screen. Then you said it that the participant could share. Try it
There, PowerPoint.
Sorry, everyone, you guys were ready. Yeah, there we go. Okay, back in business. We're good, as we were.
All right, so I could have been showing you like a really amazing masterpiece a second ago and said, that's my painting. You would have been like, yeah, cool. Anyways, so that's a picture of me. That's a painting that I completed recently. And the picture of the little tiny small town I grew up in. So what I'm going to be talking about today is uncovering. And I am not the genius who came up with this. This gentleman, Kenji Yoshino, is. He's the Chief Justice Earl Warren Professor of Constitutional Law at NYU Law School in New York City. And he really is a genius. He created all of this in conjunction with IBM. And none of this is confidential in the sense that I've taken out anything that's IBM specific to this deck. So when I say why we're talking about this here, this, in a nutshell, and I've taken out the IBM specific numbers, but 65% is a pretty good rule of thumb. Employee engagement drives client satisfaction, whoever your clients or customers are, and by about 65% when you're engaged, when you have a high level of employee engagement. And that in turn is going to improve your client experience ratings, which brings in more revenue. It's like a virtuous circle here. And the why becomes very clear when you look at how much money you stand to gain from a business perspective. Unfortunately, and when I talk about Fortune 500, this is primarily a lot of American companies, but not necessarily. But almost all of them do have a diversity and inclusion officer and all kinds of programs. But unfortunately, despite this, as of 2017, as you can see, these are some woeful numbers as far as who is in places of power in those CEO offices. And real brief, sort of the timeline of diversity and inclusion models and how people have been thinking about it, at least in this country, I'll say. Legal compliance really became an issue in around 1964, and it continues. And we started talking about unconscious bias in this country in the 1990s, and we continue to do so. But uncovering talent is really something that's come to the forefront the last few years. And to understand what uncovering is, we really need to understand what covering is first. So covering, and Kenji gets all into this in this book, which is a fantastic book. I can't emphasize that enough. But covering is essentially a strategy through which an individual is going to downplay a known stigmatized identity in order to blend into the mainstream. And almost all of us do this in some way, shape, or form, if not many of them, every day. Broadly, there's 4 types of covering. There's appearance-based covering, affiliation-based, advocacy-based, and association-based. And there's a few of these slides have a lot of words on them, and I want you all to understand. I'm going through this very quickly because it's a huge topic, and I don't have an hour and a half that this whole topic really needs to do this justice and in an interactive, conversational way. So I'm not going to read a lot of this to you. I am happy to share the whole deck with you, which shows all the hidden slides that I'm not going to even skim through. I'm not going to even show because we just don't have time. But I'm happy to share all of this. But briefly, appearance is what it sounds. It concerns with how people alter their self-presentation. Affiliation has to do with how people will avoid behaviors that are widely associated with their identity, whichever that may be, and there can be multiple per person. And advocacy-based is about how much somebody might stick up for their group, or whichever group is being attacked. And association-based covering really is about how people will avoid actual contact with other people, with other group members from that group. So I'm gonna put this out to all of you. What percentage do you think of people across all kinds of people have reported covering on at least one axis at work? Any guesses?
95.
95, highest guess?
At 95, that is high. It's 61. Thank God it's not 95% across everybody. But as you see, depending on what group you're talking about, those numbers do approach 95% for LGBT individuals. 83% of LGBT individuals report covering at work, at least at some point. And when we start talking about intersectionality, and we start talking about female, Asian, LGBT individual, well, suddenly you're talking about a large percentage of that intersectional group. And admittedly, the first time I saw these numbers, I went right down the row and was like, yup. Got to a straight white men, 45%. It's like, really? That's surprising, because that for me, that was the one that was very surprising. So do you think that you could recognize covering? And how might you be covering someone that you know is doing this? So I want to pause before I get into how do we help people uncover. And I'm going to share a personal story with you for a second. So I cover and have been covering to various degrees my whole life. There are multiple things that I cover about myself, which are, some of them are kind of obvious, and I can hide them more or less. I have tattoos all up and down my arm. I can kind of hide these, I don't know, as you see with the sweater I'm wearing. And that has its own group of stigmas, depending on where in the world you go. And I have definitely purposefully worn long sleeves in very hot weather, just because I really didn't want people to think whatever they might think of me. That's a little example. And by little, that's probably the wrong word. Pardon me, as I said, it's very late for me. But it's just one example, I'll say. Another one, and so these other two I'm going to share quickly, are far less obvious. My whole life was very careful to talk about my partners as my boyfriend, my husband. And because I am pansexual, I'll say that with you all now. And I wanted it to be very clear to who I was talking to, that I was talking about a male partner. It was important to me that nobody mistake what I was talking about for potentially a female partner. And when I started understanding the I knew I was doing damage to myself. It's almost like, well, who cares? In a way, I mean, honestly, but when I realized how much damage I could be doing by behaving in this way around other people who might now feel like they have to cover it that way, that's what really hit home for me. Like, oh, forget about how I feel about this. For my own reasons, I need to be comfortable with my own sexuality, but that's neither here nor there. What drives me is making other people feel comfortable around me, and to realize that my actions in covering might actually be causing other people around me to cover themselves, which is something I would never want anyone to do. That's when I started going out of my way to use words like my partner, and in order to consistently help other people feel like it's okay, this is a safe space. And that's really the gist of why this is so important, why it's so important to recognize what covering is, recognize it in ourselves when we do it, and recognize it in other people, and encourage others to not cover. Because when people can bring their whole selves to work, amazing things happen. So this is the impact on your businesses and your employers' businesses, because of the impact that this has on the individuals working there. So 61% of employees are reporting covering, 60 to 73% are saying it's somewhat to extremely detrimental to their sense of self. And you look at 53% of our organizations state that their leaders expect their employees to cover, which is horrible. So, and you can see the sort of downward spiral of awfulness here on the right. Covering demands creates a culture of conformity, which creates diminished commitment and weaker performance. So the answer is increasing psychological safety. Now that I've brought you down into this deep, dark, oh my God, this is terrible hole. How do we get out of it? We increase psychological safety on our teams. And psychological safety, in a sentence, is the best definition I've ever seen, is a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, and a team climate is characterized by interpersonal trust and mutual respect in which people are comfortable being themselves. And I can't stress that enough. That feeling of being able to be comfortable with being yourself at work, it leads to fewer covering demands spiral upwards into encouraging and having psychological safety, which allows for greater authenticity and better performance. Oh, so that's how we get out of this. So what can we as leaders do? And when I use the word leader for all of us. I don't care if you manage people or have anybody actually reporting to you. We can all lead from wherever we are in whatever organization we're in. So what can we all do? We can encourage psychological safety where we work. And we can do that in some fairly clear ways. So you can encourage speaking up. And this is generally in meetings, because there are people who will, for many reasons, maybe they're just shy, maybe they're covering in some way that is non-obvious to you, for a reason that is non-obvious to you. So reach out to those silent partners in meetings. You've been silent. I'm wondering, what are you thinking? Use whiteboards and text chats in your virtual meetings. Those tools encourage folks who are less inclined to speak up, for potentially because they feel, because of their culture, their economic background, their educational status, all kinds of different reasons. They feel like they're not entitled or allowed to speak up. No appreciation when ideas are shared. and truly listen and show it. Help build trust, spend time together, use webcams for virtual meetings, if you're not sick of them yet. Share non-work interests and create cross-team projects. And so there's three pillars to doing this at an organizational level. And it starts with the individuals. So rather than attempting to de-bias individuals one by one, which every individual at any organization is hopefully doing to some degree themselves, it just doesn't scale for very large organizations, nor can you rely on people to say, yes, ma'am, I will do that. So first comes diagnosis, and that's just understanding ways in which you might be covering, or ways and habits and things you say, do, or be amongst your peers and your team that may be unbeknownst to you until now, encouraging covering. Habit formation really comes down to noticing diagnosing the issues and then turning those into habits. So for me, it was noticing, becoming aware. One of the things was becoming aware of talking about my husband or my boyfriend and talking about my partner and making that into a habit. Choice architecture, I'm going to be very honest with you as we draw to the end of my chat here. I haven't had my speaker notes throughout all of this visible to me, and I really didn't want to spend the time trying to figure out how to look at them. So off the top of my head, I believe that choice architecture is really about in your hiring streams and in your interviewing process, in those streams of how you're taking new people into your company, to set up in place at those points with the people who are going to be at the front line, the recruiters, at the next line of interviewing, those folks who are hiring managers or not, whoever those actual middle folks are who are doing the interviewing, as well as the folks who have the final conversations and make those offers, making sure that you have training in place and checks and balances in place at those different points so that you are building that architecture or creating a more diverse workforce that encourages people to diagnose what they see about themselves and on the teams around them, and then encourage those positive habits. So I'm going to end with a question to all of you. You certainly don't have to answer aloud unless you'd like to, but the question is, what will you do to both recognize what covering you may do, how you might be encouraging others to cover unintentionally, and how you can help yourself and others to uncover. So, thank you.
Cool. Okay, so we'll do a bit of a question session now, and then we can let Stacey go to bed. Does anyone have a question? I hope so. I don't know if anybody had anything to occur during that chat?
How would they put this into practice at IBM?
So here, how are you putting this into practice at IBM?
So this is a workshop that actually takes about 90 minutes and can be done in huge groups even, and it can be done virtually, but this what you just saw is part of a 90-minute interactive workshop that is run. I am empowered to go out and do this for any team who would like me to do this for them. Anybody at IBM who goes through a training session, it's about a 3-hour training on this topic, and watches a whole host of videos and does a whole host of little quizzes to make sure you truly understand this material. I can go out and do this for folks. So this is it's part of the culture that the company is trying to build. And there are individuals who, that's their job, is to offer these kinds of workshops on a rolling basis throughout the year, all around the world. And since all of them are virtual now, it's kind of great. I can sign up for workshops that are happening at 2 in the morning for me, if I want to be in a workshop when I actually first get up in the morning. Because I am up that early in my time. But yeah, these are part of our culture. And if anybody who is in the audience would like to have this whole workshop run for your team, please do get in touch. I am happy to arrange that and do that for you.
I have contact details.
How have you found, or have you found technology and products, when you built technology and products to kind of enable people within IBM to get better at this, or to catch these biases as they happen?
You get that question?
No, not at all.
Have you built any tools or processes around actually putting this stuff into practice? Making people.
Similar technologies.
Yeah, specifically technologies or sort of digital tools.
I really haven't seen anything that I would call, off the top of my head, I haven't seen anything like that. And as I'm thinking about, it's a great question, because as I'm thinking about it, I am suspecting the reason why is this really is all about interpersonal relationships and how you are presenting and both yourself and how you want other people to understand how it's okay to interact with you. It's a great, you may be onto like the next $1 million startup idea. I admit the ideas crossed my mind, like how could I digitize and operationalize these kinds of tips and this way of thinking? I don't know of any right now. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I recognize I'm rambling a bit now, but yeah, I really do think it is because it is all about human to human interactions. And so if you figure out or you want to chat about how might we digitize this and try to make a tool to help people with this, please do reach out. It's a great idea.
Anyone else have a question?
I just have a hypothetical scenario running in my mind. So say somebody at your organization on your team is, for example, the homosexual person, and you see some diagnosis that they're covering. So how do you approach them and tell them that it's all right, they're welcome to be a part of their team? How do you make them come out of their shell?
So that one was, as a hypothetical, let's imagine that you've noticed evidence that somebody on your team is covering, you think it may be about their sexuality. How do you then approach them? How do you approach them if you sort of feel like it's going on, but it's not over?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think the answer really much depends on, are you this person's manager or not? If you are, that's kind of a different story, at least in America. Because I absolutely would not be allowed to say to that person anything, even, it doesn't matter what my intentions are. I can't say, hey, I think you're gay and I just want you to know that's totally okay. I really can't say that. However, if I'm their peer, or I'm maybe a manager but not their manager, I'm not sure, I can tell you right now, I definitely wouldn't go about it that way. But there is a little more latitude for how I might approach this. And so now that I'm thinking about it, ultimately, I probably would go about it either way, kind of similarly. And that would be that I would make sure that I suspect that I would feel like I was being really awkward when I did this, and hope that it didn't come across that way. Because what I would do is try to work in an anecdote, and this is part of who I am. I tend to tell anecdotes about myself all the time, and everyone will listen. So that part wouldn't be weird. But I would try to work in an anecdote about how my 3 best friends growing up, they're all gay. They are all gay. They all marry women. These are the girls that I went to elementary school with. And I would try to bring up some childhood anecdote that entailed one of them. or I would mention that I've got the only wedding of the year I'm going to is later this year. Two of my oldest friends, Gary and George. I would try to just make little subtle comments about how my life does encompass and embrace what I believe their lifestyle might be. If nothing else, at least this person knows hopefully that I'm an open-minded individual. If they are or not gay, if that helps them to come out or not, there's really nothing I can do about it. And it's not even a matter of coming out so much as being comfortable being themselves. And I think that ultimately that's probably the best advice I can give, is if you are comfortable with yourself and you act authentically in who you are, no matter who that is, by nature of doing that, you show people, you give off that vibe, if you will, of it's okay to be yourself around me. Don't really care who that is. I'm being myself, so you should be too.
I've got a question.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, carry on.
Thank you for that.
I've got a question off the back of that one. Does it get easier? I mean, you have to sort of take a leap of faith, I guess, and decide to have that authentic reaction. I mean, if you make it a habit, does it get easier to just do that more?
Yeah, as somebody who has been doing this since I was like 9 years old, and definitely at that age didn't understand the courage that what I was doing was taking. It was just a real bummer to be picked on by my schoolmates all the time. Over the years, yeah, it definitely gets easier because it's really, really scary at first to be yourself. And part of that is that you might not know who you are, and that's okay. But you take a stab at it, like as a designer, you're gonna iterate on your design. Take a stab at who you think you are, and be that person, be it. And if it doesn't feel right, well then maybe that's not who you are. But the more you can embrace who you are, whoever that is, and be okay with that, and really, truly love yourself for who you are, and know that there's nobody else in the entire universe quite like you, and that if nothing else, that's amazing. Truly. I mean, that's like, that is like mind-boggling amazing. And if for no other fact, that is the reason to be you in as fullest as you can be. And if each one of you walks out of this room tonight and says, yeah, I'm gonna be me, I'm gonna be my authentic self 100% as much as I can be, the rippling effect around you of the people that you are around in your own lives, at work, at home, at school, wherever you may go, I promise you may not see it, you may not notice it, because they're gonna take it and ripple it out themselves. But you will have an amazingly positive effect on the world. And I may sound really like kind of wackadoodle in talking in such grand terms about these things, but I truly believe that, and that's why I'm so passionate about this topic. If we all can uncover ourselves and be our authentic selves and really be okay with that, it's not gonna be scary because everybody's doing it. And you have truly made yourself a happier person. You made the world a better place. I swear. I guarantee it.
Nice. Well, that seems like a good place to draw a line. I do have Stacey's contact details, so if anybody wants to get in touch, hit me up and I can make that happen. I think we're on to the next endeavor.
Thank you.
John, I just feel that over time. Getting good deal.
Should we put it like this for
Hey team, next up we have Guy and Ash from Glad-Eye talking about disappeared. Awesome. Thanks guys.
Cool, sweet. Hey, thanks for having us. I feel like we sort of prepared a long time ago for a talk, maybe 8 months ago. Must admit we've changed, we've deviated. This is not really on topic, but we thought current political situation in the US, we thought that talking about this project that we just launched, Data Disappeared, it felt apt, and we wanted to give a bit of a sort of a backstory into our creative, our design process, how we worked to deliver this project a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So I'm Guy. I'm head of design and one of the co-founders of Glad-Eye.
And I'm Asher, I'm one of the senior designers at Meetup. Sweet, so I mean, I guess we should probably start back about 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, we started working with this great company called Highline. They're a spin-off of the Huffington Post team. And basically at the time they wanted to start writing longer form articles, like 3,000 to 5,000 word long articles that had some sort of mostly left-leaning, but like left-leaning social topics that they couldn't do on their normal platforms, so they started Highline. And we came into the picture as sort of a design, creative development partner to that. And since then, we've worked on almost every piece that's come out in the last 5 years.
Yeah, totally. It's a really exciting partnership. We get to do great design work, give a chance to sort of really push it. Great development work as well. And yeah, it's been a great relationship. They're sort of open to us challenging and pushing them to go further.
It's really cool. We get a lot of creative freedom, which is not always the case in jobs. So
totally, and we believe in what they do as well. They're very much investigative, old school, years and years of research. So this project was 5 years in the making. The one that we're working on, it's 5 years of research and work that led up to it. Just a little bit about the way we work. Probably everyone works in a similar way now, but for the last 5 years we've worked remotely. Their team is in primarily New York, and so we've worked remotely. In the beginning, Photoshop files. We were bouncing Photoshop files back and forward.
3, 4 gigabytes at a time.
Awesome.
Send them to New York and back again. That was fun.
Absolutely, and we've tried every sort of prototyping tool that we could get our hands on and sort of sharing, but obviously we're in a great space, and I think probably everyone in the room is really familiar with the tools that we're using now.
I mean, we use Figma as a design tool, but with all these things, we want to try and figure out just like the very edges of the software, because it's so adaptable. And so we found Figma is great for design, it's really collaborative, but it's also a really great tool for things like presentations, which we've found has been really beneficial for us. So as we've been working through this process, we've had a lot of iterations back and forth with the team on different time zones, and often they need to share designs with higher ups or people outside of what would be a normal meeting. And we found Figma actually just cuts out what would take like hours to do a PowerPoint presentation in the past. We just put it on Figma, make a presentation, and it can be shared with anyone on the team.
So this is really key for there's a lot of stakeholders that we're dealing with, and we're sort of having meetings, small meetings, making creative decisions. So as a way of presenting, we tend to kind of preserve a bit of a history so that anyone who's been past designs can sort of recap. They can catch up on creative design decisions that happened on the way. We found this is a way that sort of avoids backtracking and having to explain a decision that happened weeks ago. So that's just what we're showing here is a little
sneak peek.
Presentation 4 of 8 there, so it did evolve.
Blew out.
For that. Like all good projects, it started with a brief. This brief is actually really good, super comprehensive. Initially started in about 2018, started the discussion about this project. It was really broadly about the US government and the way they were manipulating data and sort of hiding data. End of 2019, it really narrowed focus and became about Trump specifically and Trump's government, and specifically the way they are obfuscating, manipulating, or just outright removing data, the impact that has on conversation, on legislation, and we recognise the importance of this project. It felt heavy, it felt serious. We wanted to treat it with the right level of kind of gravity. So.
Total trigger warning, if you're a Trump supporter, you're really not going to like this presentation. You'll just get to work, so sorry. It was really big. We early on we spoke to them about the amount of content that was going to happen. We knew we had a 3,000 plus word introduction with these 30 different individual stories. These were kind of case studies, different examples across all of the different sort of areas of government. Broadly categorized into sort of 8 categories or rubrics, as they're referred to. And so we knew that this was going to be a challenging reading experience, and the challenge to us as designers was how to make this in a way that people were going to read as much as possible, not get bored. So it had to be engaging, but also true to that reading experience, and like in the UX sense, actually quite easy to read.
Absolutely, yeah. So where to begin? We sort of took a 2-pronged approach. Like in our first presentation, we really wanted to figure out the creative. So for us, it's about what we call a creative territory. This is very much about the kind of tone, the mood of the piece. We present, in this case, 3 different kind of creative territories. Whether it was a light-hearted, more humorous approach, whether it was more we had sort of more generative, more crazy approach. Where we landed was this idea of sort of visual information decay. Very much on the nose, it feels quite literal, but we love this idea that there was imagery, or even the website, some sense of visual decay that was happening. We quickly ruled out that sort of not grungy, not dirty, it was very much this idea of the erosion of the image, of the visual that you're seeing through this website.
Yeah, and with the team at Highline, they're reporters, so they're used to working right to the wire and publishing things last minute, but they've also got like fact checkers and editors that go through stuff as well. So a lot of the content we get is really last minute. Like we've had cases where we're publishing at 2 a.m. and content's coming in at like 11 p.m. and we're kind of rushing it done. So we knew whatever territory we took, it had to be really robust and had to set up a framework for what was to come further down the line.
So I really like to separate creative from design. This idea that the creative should stay true. Once you've agreed to the creative territory, that's it. Like we're all agreed, we're all
kind of aligned on that. The design may change, the execution, the specific colours, the look may change. Creative territory, that stays true. And so it's really important we got that kind of alignment on that. With that in mind, then we went into sort of first round of design art direction. This is all images taken, some from the web, screenshots, shot on my screen when my graphics card broke. So just references from wherever we could grab, broadly grouped into focus on type, texture, the use of abstract patterns. And again, this is very much getting the feel from the client, from the Highline team, like where do they see this project sitting? What resonates with them as the reporters who know these stories? What's landing, what's feeling right? Both these being references, it's sort of low effort from us. So they have no qualms saying, hey, this is terrible.
Yeah.
There's no hurt feelings. It's quick. It's sort of it's an early sort of
It's a gut reaction to like the brief and what we kind of think feels right.
Absolutely.
Really fast way to get into an end result. Yeah, cool. And then the structure we knew, we had a rough idea of the 3,000 words that we were playing with in the introduction, how it's split across categories, the rubrics, what they call, so 3 to 4 of these stories per category. And they're really quite unrelated in some ways, so they may fit under something like climate change, but actually the stories were written by different reporters, even different companies. There was Republica and Highline working in conjunction. So we started to explore early on this idea of, well, how do we show these stories and so they feel like part of a general narrative, but they actually got their own weight and their own gravity to each individual story. Without just being like a snippet or like a quote, as you will.
So we jumped on this sort of V2 of the wireframes, but we really wanted to spin up some wires quickly so that we could start exploring, so that we could start clicking buttons, actually reading in browser and get a feeling for navigating this thing. We tried a couple of different ways. You can sort of see, although these are wireframes, these do include kind of some of the early design ideas. It was very much about, we had the text on standalone documents. We needed to start figuring out how it was going to feel. So these are slightly more designed wireframes. But, this was sort of our starting point, thinking about how you can jump between these different categories, how we can make the most of how we can keep people through a 3,000 word introductory essay and not just bore the heck out of them before that even thinking.
Do you want questions at the end, though?
Yeah, maybe questions at the end, unless it's really specific. Yeah.
Oh, it was just about whether or not content had actually been written at this point, whether you're working with real content or basic.
Yeah, question.
Sort of mixed bag. The brief contained a 3,000 word introduction, so we had the introduction, so we kind of tonally we understood, and that was the most positive part of the whole piece. The introduction was actually reasonably optimistic, and we had a single example of what these blurbs, like a singular sort of example, would be. At the time that we got the brief, we were told it would be 100 plus blurbs or stories. So we were planning for something slightly bigger than where we ended up, but we had enough that we could gauge the feel, which is how we actually always tend to play it. We want enough content that we can start to design. So it's not, I hate using lorem ipsum, like it makes no sense, doesn't progress the job, it doesn't achieve much. So, yeah. So we really needed enough to gauge it up front.
Design. That actually came together. Oh, shit. Oh, this is So we knew we were getting words, thousands of words from Highline, and we actually needed a visual way to tell the story as well. And we started to throw away, we've used lots of different techniques in the past with Highline. Often we are suppliers of the imagery. And this time we really wanted to take a more image-based approach, but then looking at how we can just use this idea of information visual decay in these images themselves. And so, guys, a long time nerd of glitching out images, and I love the effect as well. So we decided to take that approach with this, take these, a lot of the time, stock imagery, found stock imagery online that we could use, that we could license, so we didn't have to take our own photos, which is really important with our time frame, but then really manipulate them into ways that felt unique. And showing your photos. Thanks. Yeah, and then manipulate them in a way that felt really unique to this piece and kind of went back to the core creative territory that we set out in the beginning. Yeah.
So I need in,
Yes, you
you
can.
start placing treatments of body.
Oh, we'll go
We're
through
gonna
each
go
one
through-
individually, so.
We'll nerd out on them.
Yeah. We'll spend that time on this.
Cool.
First one's really simple. Pixel stretching. Basically, in Photoshop, take a single pixel slice of any image, extend it out. We like this because, again, it really touches on that creative territory, loss of information, the reproduction of this single line of pixel information carried down. We thought it was a really simple technique that turns a really average stock photo into something that we can potentially play with, do something cool with. So this felt like an easy kind of off the bat one.
Totally, and jumping off that, we wanted to dive deeper into this idea of like, well, what if we didn't have a lot of control over how we decorated the image? What if it was actually more organic, more in keeping with this idea that information's being lost all the time in government? And so we played with this next idea, which is really simple, but like a really cool technique called,
Data bending.
data bending. I just call it deleting data from a picture. But it's basically the way a computer reads an image is just a text file. It's a massive text file. And by taking chunks of that text out of that text file, you start to degrade the image in really interesting, organic, random, every single time it's different, these kind of beautiful ways. It plays with color, plays with positioning, X and Y. And we started to hone in with this idea that actually, what if we didn't have control over the graphics? What if we kind of left it up to the mercy of the data being deleted or distorted in some way?
It just feels so right. It's so apt, such an apt sort of visual analogy. This idea of the removal of information, how it changes your perception of this source image.
Just a quick question. So, as far as from what I can see, this starting concept, so are you trying to run some sort of like a programming language which reads the metadata of the images, or some sort of AI?
We'll touch on that a little bit later, but it's definitely not AI. That was concept 2 that we tried to sell, was a generative engine that produced images.
A little bit too small for that.
Yeah,
Building an AI machine, it'd be so
But it is reading some sort of metadata as far as I can understand.
Yeah.
This is an offline. So all of these tools are offline ways of manipulating images. So within Photos, this is just text editor on desktop. But in saying that, the final result we do have is image transitions that use this effect and transitioning between multiple images using this effect but created within WebGL. So it was an offline tool that actually made its way into the final
But
development.
it's pretty nifty. That's all I can say.
Oh, thanks.
This is a technique I've loved for years. It's kind of right in your face if you use Photoshop. I'm sort of an old school Photoshop nerd, and this WBMP format it's just a safer web format within Photoshop. We have 3 different kind of pattern variants that you can apply to an image. It's a legacy image format, essentially.
Or phones, really. I mean, if you ever sent like a really early SMS to your mate, or text, I think it was called. I'm a bit younger here. Text to your mate, and it came through as this kind of like grainy picture. It was probably this format.
It's got a red, like a red, almost a slightly half-tone cartoony kind of look to it. And saying that fit with our theme, our self-implied kind of creative theme, which was removal of information, the simplification of this image through this manipulation. And for time, it was really easy. We could apply this to 40 different images in a short period of time.
Yeah. And the last bit we have, which is probably one of my favorite ones, is pixel sorting, and it's kind of hard one to explain, but basically it takes RGB and the luminosity of an image, takes each pixel at a time and stretches it to the next closest partner and then stops that stretch. And it's a really old, I mean, to build this we actually couldn't do in Photoshop, we couldn't do in any other software. We built a program that did it online, and we loaded images in one by one and play with the you can see us playing with the X and Y with the mouse there, and took a screenshot because there was no other way to do this in software that we could find.
Yeah, totally. Initially we thought quite hard about including this within the project. This is a prototype we've had floating around for a few years, and it's still I find it really exciting to have it dynamically in browser. But ultimately it was sort of it's quite a heavy processor intensive and also quite a heavy visual experience, so we opted to leave it out of the final.
It'll burn the graphics card out of your computer. Yeah, you get real fast. And this is kind of how it all came together. So we used a variety of these different techniques to make this really unique kind of pixelated effect. And these are all really random, so we just left this up to the mercy of the software and what we've built and what we've done with it. Giving up creative control is really hard sometimes, and being at the mercy of what you get, but in this case, we really love the effect. It's quite creepy, quite dark, really fits the brief of what we were trying to go for, and it's really ownable as a style, which we try really hard to make something feel ownable in this piece.
Yeah, so I think having that visual impact, we wanted this piece to feel visceral, to feel the gravity of what's happening. This is really, it's a serious situation, it's a political situation, and this tone felt like it was designed that complemented the seriousness of the subject matter.
Oh yeah, well, so the other thing we kind of touched on, which is really ironic considering tonight's our future tech, so this is past tech. This is very ancient technology used within the government today, even the United States government. But I mean, the first one we touched on is a bit more obvious. It's around the stacking of paper and the information going missing just by actual paper records. The second one though is around punch cards, and these are really cool. They're about this big. They're used in the government to store information or to rather call up data across the bank. Right? You've got computers the size of this room, and they needed a way to find the different information archives. So they use these punch cards to bring up that data. And when we read through the introduction, they talked about this, and we really loved this idea, and we did a bit of research on it, and found a way to generate these punch cards online. And they ended up being a visual motif for the different categories. So military and climate change and science, they all had their own sequence or pattern that defined them apart from the other ones. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is an event really early on, even as early as the wireframes. We loved this idea. We went ahead and prototyped this very early in the process, and it was essentially it's a text shredding machine. It's WebGL, and it's importing HTML copy, which allowed us to easily update the WebGL, so it could just read an HTML file, pull in the copy. It was all fully selectable. We're pretty proud of ourselves. We had this technique. It felt cool. Felt rad. The shredding was really fun. We continued to sort of iterate on it, but sort of come back to this in a bit.
Yeah.
We did love it. Bring it all together.
Yes, so we had all these territories, all this kind of stuff, and then Guy and I have just really worked on this and tried to find the right visual, the place where it's land, where everything felt kind of harmonious. So just different executions, playing with type, color. I mean, this is just a lot of fun as designers. We've got a lot of creative freedom that we can use. Play with different techniques with like type again, so how can we degrade type, how can we make it feel like information has been lost. Bringing in some of those punch card elements.
So that we were pushing how much color are we monochrome? Are we bringing color through the naturally glitched color? Are we layering? Initially, we thought about these background effects sort of slowly transitioning, like an easing in the background that would complement this sort of harsh, brutal movement of the vector graphics on top in terms of the copy. Again, you're seeing the striking punch card come out. This is an approach we had. We knew the menu had to be accessible pretty much at all times, so you could jump to different chapters. This was an approach we had that brought in the punch card relevant to the section you were currently looking. It felt suitably aggressive in your face.
Probably too aggressive for them.
Yeah.
But with this, we just love pushing the boundaries and seeing how far we can push something until it starts to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I mean, with this whole piece feeling dark and uncomfortable and a little bit creepy, this was a goal of ours in the beginning, to make it feel like that to anyone that picked up to jump on the website.
Then we did have a problem though. We realized we just had too many ideas, too many things, too many things competing, and the design was overwhelming the content, and we were finding more and more it was an exercise in design, not a reading experience.
Yeah.
And so we knew that we had to kill some of our favorite things. Shooting text was awful. We spent ages trying to sell on the client, showed them prototypes, showed them heaps of different versions, and then we slowly dawned on us that it was horrible, and it
Right.
You couldn't read the article, which defeated the whole purpose. So it was just like visual awesomeness without any of the functionality. So we got rid of it.
Low-res text, something never quite got off the ground, just didn't work. And this in-browser glitching, so that was pixel sorter, and that was bringing some sort of dynamic glitching background, some sort of animation into the background. What we decided, we're going to turn off all animations. Everything's going to be driven by scroll. So you've got total control over any glitch, any effect that is happening is entirely based on your scrolling behavior. So you can stop and read at any time with no interference. And that felt quite like a big moment when we did that. It felt right. Suddenly the timing, the whole piece sort of came together.
You get these moments when you design and just something clicks, and that was that moment of just like, oh, okay, that works. Cool.
Yeah. It was a moment of taking things away. Yes. So just put up, this is a pretty sort of janky screenshot showing screen video. Maybe it's not. Right. Is there any information?
I don't think it.
That's it. So this is pretty rough, but this is a video capturing the scrolling experience, the introduction.
It's a really good introduction. A massive load of time. This is not part of it. Just in case you're wondering. It's just the suspense is building.
Shall I jump to the?
Yeah, it seems like we're on like 2G.
Yeah. Computer, please.
All right, well, we'll just do like a live preview, and it's probably better anyway.
I'll just take this moment to say if people have questions, we're going to have our next speaker next in one of the Q&A at the end.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
Man, we could hype this up to be as cool as we wanted because you guys can't even see it.
This may just be homework, I'm afraid. It's really not looking good.
I have another quick question. Sorry. So,
Do you want to wait till the very end, or do you?
sure.
John, oh, no, fill it now so you can get like a
Yeah. So, for somebody, hypothetically, if somebody is going through the new series, what did happen? So how would they see your content? But like, are they still gonna swipe, or are they still gonna scroll?
on a phone.
On a tablet, on a phone?
Yeah, just scrolling. So with all of these experiences, when we go down to something like the mobile, it's coverage first, because we know we don't have the real estate to build on these graceful effects. We try to get them in different ways, but they never hinder that reading experience, especially as we know that people on phones are often on the go, they're on the bus, or even just sitting down is movement. So we really simplify it right down. It's really fast. And we often also load quite a lot of different assets in as well, so we're not doing huge, like, you're not downloading 4 gigs of stuff every time you're on a mobile phone. Laptops are way more, forgiving. We know that people often are on Wi-Fi, and we can really hype that experience up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, sweet. So this is the scrolling. This is the introduction, and quite a chunky introduction, but this great realization that the title doesn't disappear actually naturally occurred within that introductory sentence.
Yeah. And you can see the imagery in the background starting to flick, and whenever you stop scrolling, it doesn't do anything, so it's a really static. If I'm scrolling, we're not trying to distract you from the actual article itself, but we do want it to be uncomfortable, and we intentionally designed it to be uncomfortable as you're scrolling.
Apologies for the sound, just into a kitchen.
That was just a bit of background noise. This isn't on the website, by the way, this is just Guy's house.
So each one of these black cards coming in, this is the category, and all the associated stories are the stacker stories. Just using a simple Z index for the index card there, so it's always accessible, always hidden in the background, and again playing with this kind of jarring, slightly broken layout. So you're always getting these glimpses of this broken video coming through the punch cards. And again, you can see the transitions happening, the sort of broken transitions.
And so to your point before about the AI, we're actually doing that effect that we did on the desktop, but we're doing it in code like that. So it's deleting and reinserting data from different imagery as you're scrolling randomly, organically, every single time, which is really cool.
Totally. And all done with GL, backgrounds with GL, and everything on top is just standard HTML. So we avoided some of the resolution issues you get with the purely with GL based site.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the end.
Just going to need a few minutes to set up, so please bear with us.
If anybody needs to refresh it, use the bandwidth messaging.
I'm really, I love to create something like now, which one of the different things that are you so interested?
We've got Philly from the Datacom Foundry up next, and yeah, I think he's about to talk to us about some XR,
Something like that.
something like that, some sort of future tech.
That's right. Good evening, team. So my name is Tibirutra. I'm from Datacom. I probably heard of it. More specifically, I'm from a team called Foundry. So I've got a really cool title. Don't be jealous. My title is Emerging Tech Practice Lead. So what that means is I get to play with all the cool tech. That's my day job. So that's really cool. So for example, AI, AR, VR, Vision AI, and so on. So although it sounds cool, my specific role, what it does is take all these cool tech and actually productionize it. How do we actually use it in real world examples, right? So one of the examples that I'm going to talk about is using HoloLens, which is something that we've been thinking of it as gimmicky more recently in terms of virtual reality and augmented reality on the mobile phones. It's been sort of limited it's kind of had an accelerator point, but it's kind of been limited. But because of COVID, it's actually been accelerated even more at the moment, and I'll actually show you those examples. So who's actually used any sort of virtual reality headsets? So like Oculus and so on. Pretty much all of us, right? So they've kind of hit a limitation, I would say. Would you guys agree in terms of that, right? But where we kind of see the next iteration is iPhone introducing sort of the LiDAR technologies and so on, right? So Microsoft announced HoloLens about 5 years ago, version 1, which is really cool. So if you remember Kinect, where it came with Xbox, they discontinued it. Obviously, nobody was making games. But what they did is they basically took the technology and put it into a headset. So this here, what I have is version 2 of HoloLens. So the cost of this is $6,000. It is quite expensive. It's definitely not targeted towards consumers. It is an enterprise device. And when I show you the demos, you'll know exactly what I mean, right? So this is it. It's not tethered to anything. So everything that I show here, I'm just remotely connected so that you can see what I can see, right? So I can walk around. I'm not tethered to anything. It's got a Windows 10 machine inside it. So if you can build apps for Unity or Windows 10, you can build that for this, right? So what I can do is, so you can easily adjust it at the back. So on, you can put it on and type it. So now I can see anything and everything, right? So I'm not distracted in terms of virtual reality headsets and so on. I can move around, no issues. Okay? And if I'm kind of dizzy, I can right? So this is a new feature that they added. So it's really cool in terms of ergonomic. It fits really well. So there's a button at the back. It turns it on. So all I've done is I've connected both my laptop and my HoloLens to the same Wi-Fi network. And that's sort of the developer preview portal. Once I turn it on, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm seeing. Second, pick up the fresh. It's always a Wi-Fi. Eh? Go. There you go. Good. So that is the Windows 10 menu right there. So the usual start menu, so that's the Windows 10 menu. But for now, I'll just minimize it. So what it does is in real time, it's always going to be mapping what's in front of you. So I'll quickly show you. So what it does is, as you can see, it's mapping as I go through real time. So obviously, if somebody moves, that object still stays. So it doesn't move with the person. Yeah. But you can see I can't really quite map the person all the way there. So the LiDAR doesn't really go all the way there. So you can see those little cameras and sensors. That's what it is. So if I want to map, I can actually walk around and map the entire road. And my hand needs to be within this range. So I can't quite do this. I need to be doing it from here. Right? So it's pretty cool. So the next thing is, one of the gestures is you can control the voice as well, but I'll show you some gestures. So as soon as I hold my hand, you'll see the menu pop up there. So that's the Windows 10 start menu. So if I tap that, the menu pops up. So there's a slight delay that you'll probably see. There you go. Right. And then if I want to go quit it, I can do that. So if I put my finger, you don't see anything. But the moment I point it, you'll see those two pointers. The gestures are incredibly accurate. Okay? So what I'll show you is 3 different examples of applications. So I'll start with something simple. So in terms of, so this is one of the other things. So with the previous HoloLens, you always had to do this to click. But what they've done is they've improved the gestures. So if I see a menu, all I do is just go ahead and drag it, just like that. And if I want to click on a button, just go pitch. That's it. So that's just like Windows 10. I can put the menu over there. The menu with the dancing elephant. It's downloading. There you go. So you can just pick and drop any object there. Maybe I'll put it there. The play button. That's going to jump around. There you go. So you can see, as soon as my hand goes, it actually gives me a bit of feedback as well. So they've also thought through all the UI, UX element of actual new way of interacting, right? So if I see something closed, the natural way is to actually just drag and make it big. Right, so it's really cool. So in terms of visual, so there is a bit of a delay. I realize why you guys are laughing 2 seconds later. So in terms of, there are a few other buttons as well. So there is a, I don't know if you can hear. So there's a volume button on this side, and there is brightness on this side as well. So I can increase and decrease the brightness. So that's something cool, but still, again, as I said, gimmicky. So let me close this guy, otherwise it's going to be distracting. Nope, he doesn't want to close. Go away.
Nope.
Nope.
Microsoft.
You can say.
Can you invite him to the death now?
Alright, so the next one is kind of serious one. So let's say, for example, in terms of education, where you kind of want to train somebody, in terms of COVID symptoms. So if you're a medical doctor, before you even go to treat a patient, you kind of want to see, before it's kind of a dangerous environment, right? So you want to see before that, what are the symptoms, what sort of medications that you need to give and so on. So this is something that we didn't build, but it's one of the examples that comes with it. So here's the menu. It's here somewhere. Okay. There you go. So what you see in front of me is actually a real world example of a COVID patient. So I can play stuff. Next. So you can actually see he's going to be moving around. You can see his heart rate. He's going to be coughing. So this is a real 3D scan of a COVID patient. So they've done a 3D scan of it. And if I don't want to probably go too close to it, it looks a bit disgusting, but you can see it's a real world example of it. Okay? So where we at Datacom see this kind of going towards next is remote assistance. So I actually had a meeting with a customer about 2 days ago, where they've got a huge assembly line where they're actually manufacturing fridge, washing machine, you probably guess what that is. They're going to be actually, they ship their assembly line in China and Istanbul and so on. So they used to send 5 engineers with them. Can they do it now? They can't. But they've been fined at the moment because they actually promised all these things up front. But because of COVID, they can't really travel. So what they're looking at now is actually buying these headsets. All of a sudden, instead of sending 5 engineers for 3,000 each, if not more, flight ticket and accommodation and so on, all of a sudden you're just buying one headset that's $6,000. So you can see where the target market is. So what they're doing is they're going to be building applications where they already have 3D models. They're going to be importing that in here, and they're just going to basically show them how to assemble all their parts and so on. So all of a sudden, the person from Auckland can actually teach somebody in China how to assemble a part without even sending an engineer. So I'll quickly show you one small example where, think of this as somebody in Auckland who's going to call me directly. So this is real. I'm going to use Microsoft Teams. So you guys all have Microsoft Teams. But it's not Zoom. I'll send it in. So what I'll do now, still figure out how to close these apps. The elephant is still there. There's always an so that's Microsoft Teams. So there is something called remote assist. So let's start with that. So think of this as somebody in New Zealand. This. So now that's my test account. I'm going to ask this person to join. So that's dialing for me at the moment. Not.
Is anyone still there?
Yeah. There you go. So we've got pretty much Microsoft Teams running inside my HoloLens. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this and put it over here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up this ink. No. So maybe the engineer on that side is asking me to say, okay, what exactly you're looking at. So maybe I can say, I'm going to do something like this. Or I might have to maybe say, it's great when it works. So maybe for example, there's an arrow there, maybe you need to fix those ones there, and then point all the way to that. So you can actually see it stays the point, and you can even bring in your notes, your documentation. Mostly engineers go out to remote locations with their documentation with the tablet at the moment, which is revolutionary when they have tablet, right? But all of a sudden, when you have this, you're hands-free. You can actually get to see, the engineers remotely can get to see what I see at the same time, hands-free, health and safety and so on, which is great. And if you actually think about power companies, they're actually struggling for engineers. All the engineers are above 60 years old because they're all working remotely. Nobody even wants to go there. There's no internet connection there, right? So what they're thinking of now is even if they're retired, they can be the skilled engineers who can train some of these upcoming engineers just by using these sort of devices instead of actually flying them over there. So these are some of the examples that Datacom is building at the moment. Because of COVID, it's actually increased, in terms of, before I used to have maybe once every 2 months, I used to have a meeting. Now I'm constantly just doing demos going out to the customers. So it's one of those things to keep an eye out. Definitely keep an eye on that. Thank you so much.
Stand up, we don't display, but if anybody has questions,
Any questions?
be prepared. Some people might have some stuff. Does anybody have questions for our latest speaker or previous?
So I've played with Magic Leap before.
Yes.
So is it the same sort of technology as Magic Leap?
It is. Yeah, very similar. Yeah. Although I was looking into Magic Leap as well, but they've kind of dropped at the moment. They've had a bit of leadership issues and so on.
Yeah.
So they've kind of dropped off the radar, but Magic Leap was the only competitor for this in the same category. Yeah. So another one that we're looking at, sorry, I'll get to you soon. Another one we're looking at is Railway, which is, HoloLens is not really made for ruggedized environments. It's not waterproof, it's not dustproof. So it's actually Railways in a sense, it runs Android. So think of Google Glass in the same area, but it has Teams in it, it has Zoom in it. So in terms of remote engineering and working, that's the perfect scenario. Whereas this one is sort of your training somebody. Right. Or if you have sort of dust-free environment, then this is great. And perfect scenario for that particular customer I was talking about.
Building side of
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sorry.
I was wondering what you're doing with Datacom to help establish and uncover user needs, like customer problems and user problems with Interpersonal.
Yeah. So good question. So we're actually partnering with Microsoft to run an immersive experience workshop with the customers. So we are inviting at the moment all the CEOs and CIOs because it's a bit of an expensive device. So we need to show them what it's capable of, and then we're hoping it will slowly trickle down in terms of hands-on experience. But
do you have use cases in mind, or are you sort of waiting for them to tell you?
oh, good, thank you. So there's pretty much think of all the power utility companies, it's made for it. I mean, it's the same scenario that's replicatable. And if you can see, I didn't build any of these apps. It's out of the box. So what's stopping you from just buying?
Any other burning questions?
How cross-platform is this kind of technology? Like, could I use an iPad with the newest namescapes for mapping stuff?
So
like, can you pair this and someone with an iPad, someone with an iPhone, someone with a MacBook? Like, can they all be in the same place together?
So when you say pair, what do you mean by pairing?
Oh, like, you use this sort of technology for holding an iPad, not just over your face.
Yeah.
So you can hold an iPad and do it as well.
No, because if you actually thought about this, I'm actually hands-free, so it's all the hand gestures are working, right? If you're holding iPad, that entire interaction is wrong. But what people have done is, so they've actually used this to scan the room, and then you can take that export out and then bring it into another environment. But then again, iPad has LiDAR display, so you don't really need this for that. Yeah.
Can you play Beat Saber?
Oh, yes, you can. So you can. So there are demos. Because it's so accurate in terms of those finger movements, you can actually build all these instruments that they've done. Yeah, so it's really cool. There are some examples that I can share afterwards.
Is this motion sickness a thing with this? Like I know with the Oculus, motion sickness is a really big thing.
No, so I don't find it that motion sickness in terms of that, but potentially might get a bit more lazy because you've always got something right in front of you.
Yeah.
So that's why when they brought this feature, just flipping it out, it was
Sure.
great. It was just like,
Bring
yeah,
it.
just bring it out. Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Definitely not motion sickness. Yeah.
Do you see that just being an enterprise shop, or do you, when you see that moving out of enterprise use cases?
I wouldn't spend $6,000 to personalize something to that. Yeah, definitely at the moment, that's the narrative. It's at the enterprise level. Even the enterprise, they're buying only 10, for example, and then just reusing between the engineers. And it comes with Windows 10, so you can log in with your Windows 10 credentials and so on. So it's typical Microsoft. Yeah.
Do you find, so I just got an Apple Pencil and it only works on my iPad and not my laptop, but I find I kind of want to use it everywhere. Like, do you find your other devices lacking when you can't like interface using this method, or is it like supplanted your way of interfacing with digital tech?
Not now.
Not yet?
Not yet. It's still not yet. But maybe in about 5 years' time, once it gets a bit more small,
Yeah.
once Apple introduces it, then potentially. I think that's the next kind of consumer step that people will start realizing. One of the other thing I didn't mention is when you saw on the screen, you could actually see everything that I saw. But with HoloLens, when you actually put it on, you only see 42 degrees of angle. So it was a huge limitation. Initially, it was only about 32. On this one, they increased it. So people kind of get put off once they put it on. So what Microsoft says is even if they increase the view angle by a single degree, they have to remanufacture the entire thing. And it becomes functional bigger and bigger. But obviously, they are working towards getting it bigger. Although there's a rumor, Facebook is working towards a 72-degree field of view. Forgot the name that they bought, Aria or Aria? I don't remember. So they purchased one of the AR startups. Exactly. You have to log into Facebook.
What's the most exciting application you can see for this within the next like 10, 15 years? Like if you were to cast wide from your knowledge, you see this going, you feel really excited about this.
It's mostly in the engineering space.
Yeah, that's right.
Engineering, architecture, that's where the software science is. Because a lot of these people are kind of looking into digital twins at the moment. So all the digital twins are on the computer at the moment. You can see, what type of buildings, where are the sensors, sensors. So all the smart tech are being built into the cities. The next thing is you just go in terms of inspection, put it on. At the moment, all those are just giving you videos being played out, but it's still not quite there. But in the next 5 years, I think that's what the people are, the enterprise will.
I've got a really important one for you guys before we go. Those cool little image manipulation tools. There's a couple online questions.
For a price. The pixel sorting one is an internal prototype for us.
Yep, happy to share
Yeah.
something else through.
Yeah, a little bit before I can upload the image. Yeah.
The other ones are all kind of pixel stretching is just a Photoshop manipulation. Data being is something if you've got an image, you've got a text editing software, you just open it. And same with WBPHS Photoshop format. So pixel sort of will be the only one that's
proprietary. But if you right click on an image, open .txt file, sweet. Well, that's, and then the other one is, I think it's saved out as a legacy file in Photoshop, so it's pretty legacy. So yeah, you can over that.
Any other questions for Flat Eye, or? Because we have pizza, so we can do that.
All right.
All right. Let's
Sweet.